Cielo is calling you. The newest, friendliest, and safest casino resort and spa is calling. Morongo is calling. Good times.
U.S. defense officials responding to the crisis in Eastern Europe after Vladimir Putin ordered Russia's nuclear forces to be on heightened alert. We're live in Ukraine with the latest.
And a paddle out for peace. We're live in Manhattan Beach as surfers head out for a special ride centered on inclusion.
And for most of us, we'll head to the mid-70s this afternoon. But get ready, Southern California. The warming trend has started. We're going towards 80s, in some places even warmer. Your forecast coming up.
Live from ABC 7, this is Eyewitness News.
And good morning, I'm John Gregory.
And I'm Rachel Brown. Thank you so much for joining us this Sunday. We start with the latest in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered his nuclear deterrent forces to be on high alert. That means they are ramping up their readiness to launch if needed.
A senior defense official called this an unnecessary and escalation for Putin to take this step. This comes as Ukraine and Russia negotiations are expected to be held at the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. Right now, Russian troops are within 20 miles of Ukraine's capital of Kyiv. And that is the sound of air raid sirens in Ukraine's capital. Ukraine reporting damage to 2 nuclear facilities from Russian missile strikes. Ukrainian soldiers remain in control of the capital as Russian forces move into Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv. The United Nations says the fighting has killed at least 240 civilians. More than 368,000 people have already fled the country.
In response to the aggression early this morning, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky tweeted he has submitted an application against Russia to the United Nations International Court of Justice. This is to get the UN to formally condemn Russia's actions. Zelensky tweeted in part, quote, "Russia must be held accountable for manipulating the notion of genocide to justify aggression. We request an urgent decision ordering Russia to cease military activity now and expect trials to start next week." At last check, the Kremlin has not responded to this tweet, but Russia does have veto power within the UN. Joining us now from Ukraine is Atika Schubert.
And Atika, thanks for joining us this morning. First, can you give us any reaction to the word that the Russians have now put their nuclear forces on alert? Are you hearing anything on the ground there?
Well, it's certainly a very worrying development here, but perhaps not a surprise for many people here, considering that the Ukrainian military seems to have put up a very stiff resistance to the offensive by Russian troops. A senior U.S. defense official has called it unnecessary and an escalation. The NATO Secretary General has called this a very dangerous step, but it is an extremely worrying development for people here.
And Atika, let's talk more about this move. American officials, I should say, calling it dangerous and unnecessary. What more can you tell us about the United States response?
Well, the United States response clearly is very concerned about this, and it's interesting because it comes at the same time that we've heard that ceasefire negotiations are due to go forward. So this seems to be another classic case of Russia both escalating and at the same time indicating that they are willing to have some window of diplomacy. And if you remember, this is actually very similar to the situation we were right before the invasion. No one's quite sure what to make of it yet here, but they're hoping that ceasefire negotiations do go ahead.
Atika, the U.S. and NATO allies have been providing the Ukrainians with Javelin anti-tank missiles, also Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. The Ukrainian resistance apparently much tougher than the Russians were expecting. Are you seeing that firsthand where you are?
What we're seeing is that civilian resistance. Even small local businesses are getting involved. I spoke to a owner of a craft beer brewery here, and he is effectively turning his brewery into a factory for Molotov cocktails, pushing out hundreds and trying to get to thousands of Molotov cocktails a day. So it is incredible, the resistance here. In the meantime, we're also seeing some of those weapons and equipment coming in. Lithuania delivered their tranche of equipment and weapons overnight. So it is coming together.
And finally, let's talk about the everyday citizens who will feel the impact of this conflict the most. For those civilians that are deciding to stay for right now, at least, are they going to work? Are they going to school like normal? How is the curfew affecting them?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing normal about the situation right now in Lviv, as in all